Long ago, in my grandma's time, the Fenlands was all in bogs, as you've heard tell maybe. Great pools of black water, and creeping trickles of green water, and squishy moles as 'ud suck folk in as stepped on 'em. Well, my gran used to say how, long before her time even, the moon herself was towards dead and buried in the marshes, and, if you will, I'll tell you about it as my gran used to tell me. The moon up yonder shone and shone then, just as she does now, though you mightn't have thought it, and when she shone, she lighted up all the bog paths so anybody could walk about, safe as anything. But when she didn't shine, then out came all the things that dwell in the darkness, and went about seeking to do evil and harm to all as weren't safe behind their own hearths. Harm and mischance and mischief, bogles and dead things and crawling horrors, they all came out on nights when the moon didn't shine. Well, it came so that the moon heard tell of all this evil doing, and being kind and good, as she surely is, shining for us every night instead of taking a natural rest, she was most troubled to think of what went on behind her back like, and says she, "I'll see for myself, I will. It may be that it's none so bad as folk make out." So sure enough, come the month end, down she stepped, all wrapped up in a big black cloak and a black hood over her yellow shining hair, and straight she went to the bog's edge and looked about her. Water here and water there, waving tussocks and trembling moulds, and great black snags all twisted and bent, and before her all dark. Dark but the glimmer of the stars on the pools, and the light that came from her own white feet stealing out of her black cloak. On she went, far into the middle of the bogs, and I looking about her, and she saw many strange sights as she looked on. The witches grinned as they rode past on their great black cats, and the evil eye glowered from the darkest corners as the will-o'-the-wisps danced all about with their lanterns swinging on their backs. Then the dead folk rose in the water and looked around them with white twisted faces and hellfire in their empty eye holes, and the slimy, dripping, dead hands slithered about, beckoning and pointing and making your skin crawl with their cold, wet feeling fingers. The moon drew her cloak fast about her and trembled, but she wouldn't go back without seeing all there was to be seen. So on she went, stepping light as the wind in summer from tuft to tuft between the greedy gurgling water holes, and just as she came nigh upon a big black pool, her foot slipped, and she was nigh tumbling in. She grabbed with both hands at a snag nearby to steady herself with, but soon as she touched it, it twined itself round her wrists and gripped her so tight as she couldn't move. She pulled and twisted and fought, but it was no good. She was held fast, and fastened there she might stay, so she looked hopefully about and wondered if help would come by. But she saw naught but shifting, flurrying evil things, coming and going here and there, busy with their own ill work. Presently, as she stood trembling in the dark, she heard something calling in the distance. A voice. It called and called, then died away with a sob, and then began again with a screech of pain or fear, and called, till the marshes were full of the pitiful crying voice. Soon after, she heard steps, floundering along, squishing in the muck and slipping on the tufts, and through the darkness she saw hands catching at the snags and the tussocks, and a white face with great fearful eyes. It were a man strayed and lost in the bogs, and all around him the grinning bogles and the dead folk and the creeping horrors crawled and crowded. The voices mocked him, and the dead hands plucked at him, and ahead the will-o'-the-wisps dangled their lanterns and shook with evil glee as they led him further and further from the path. Mazed with fear and loathing for the things about him, he struggled on towards the flickering lights that looked like help and safety. "You yonder!" he'd shriek. "You! I'm caught in the boglands! Do you hear? God and Mary save us from the horrors! Help! You yonder!" And then he'd stop and sob and moan and call on all the saints and wise women and even God himself to fetch him out. And then he'd break out in a shriek again as the slimy, slithery things crawled round him till he couldn't even see the false lights before him. And then, as if it weren't bad enough already, the horrors would take all sorts of shapes, and ramping lasses would peek at him with bright eyes and stretch out soft helping hands. But when he tried to catch hold of them, they'd change in his grip to slimy things and shapeless worms, and the wicked voices would mock him with foul glee. Worse still, all the evil thoughts and deeds of his life came and whispered in his ears, and danced about and sneered out all the secret things of his own heart, till he shrieked and sobbed with pain and shame, and the horrors crawled and gibbered round about and mocked him. And when the poor moon saw that he was coming nearer and nearer to the deep holes and the deadly quicks, and further from the path, she was so mad and so sorry that she struggled and fought and pulled harder than ever. And though she couldn't get loose, with all her twisting and tugging, the black hood fell off her shining yellow hair, and the beautiful light that came from it drove away the darkness. Oh, how the man cried with joy to see such merciful light again. And from it the evil things fled back into the dark corners, for they cannot abide light. And so they left him and fled, and he could see where he was, and where the path was, and how he'd have to go to get out of the marsh. He was in such a haste to get away from the quicks and the boglands, and the things that dwelt there, that he scarcely looked at the brave light that came from the moon's shining yellow hair, streaming out over her black cloak and falling into the water at her feet. The moon herself was so taken up with saving him, and with rejoicing that he was back on the right path, that she clean forgot that she needed help herself, held fast as she was by the black snag. So off the man went, spent and gasping and stumbling and sobbing with joy, fleeing for his life out of the terrible bogs. Only then did the moon realise again her plight. For she had meant to go with him, and a great fear came to her, and she pulled and fought as if she were mad, till she fell on her knees, spent with tugging, at the foot of the snag. As she lay there, gasping for breath, the black hood fell forward over her head, and though she tried to throw it back, it was caught in her hair and wouldn't go. So out went the blessed light, and came back the darkness with all its screeching, howling evil things. They came crowding round her, mocking and snatching and beating, shrieking with rage and spite, and swearing with foul tongues, spitting and snarling, for they knew her to be their old enemy, that brave bright moon that drove them back into the corners and kept them from working their wicked wills. My, what a clabberdatch it was, and the poor moon crouched trembling and sick in the middle, and wondered when they'd make an end of it, and of her. "Damn thee," yelled the witches, "thou spoiled our spells this year agone."
"And thou keeps us in our straight coffins at night,"
moaned the dead folk.
"And us thou sends to brood in the corners,"
howled the bogles. And all the things joined in with a great and evil laughter, till the very tussocks shook and the water gurgled. And then they began again.
"We'll poison her, shrieked the witches, and howling the things laughed and laughed. "We'll smother her,
whispered the crawling horrors, and twined themselves round her knees, and laughing the rest mocked her.
We'll strangle her, screeched the dead hands and plucked at her throat with cold fingers. The dead folk writhed and grinned about her and chuckled to themselves.
We'll bury thee, down with us in the black moulds.
And again they all shouted with spite and ill will, and the poor moon crouched down and wished she were dead and done with. The things fought and squabbled as to what they should do with her, till a pale grey light began to come in the sky, and it drew near the dawning. And when they saw that, they were afraid lest they shouldn't have time to work their will, and they caught hold of her with horrid bony fingers and laid her deep in the water at the foot of the snag. And the dead folk held her down, while the bogles fought a strange big stone and rolled it on top of her to keep her from rising. Two of the will-o'-the-wisps were to take turns watching on the black snag to see that she lay safe and still, and couldn't get out to spoil their sport with her light, nor to help the poor Fenfolk to keep out of the quicks and holes at night. As the grey light came brighter in the sky, the shapeless things fled away to seek the dark corners, and the dead folk crept back into the water, or crammed themselves into their coffins, and the witches went home to their ill-doings. The green, slimy water shone in the dawning as if no ill thing had ever come near it. And there lay the poor moon, dead and buried in the bog, till someone should set her loose. But who would know where to look for her? Well, the days passed, and it was time for the new moon's coming, and folk put out pennies in their pockets and straws in their caps so as to be ready for it, and looked about uneasily, for the moon was a good friend to the marsh folk, and they were most glad when the dark time was gone and the paths was safe again, and the evil things was driven back by the light into the darkness and water holes. But days and days passed, and the new moon never came. And the nights were always dark, and the evil things were worse than ever. There was not a lane safe to travel, and the boggarts crept and wailed around the houses and peered in at the windows and sniffed at the latches till the poor Fenfolk had to keep lights all night, else the horrors would have come over the very doorsteps. Truly, the bogles of all sorts seemed to have lost all fear. They howled and laughed and screeched around, fit to wake the dead themselves, and the Fenfolk could only sit trembling and shaking by fire, and could neither sleep nor rest, nor put foot across the sill, all those dark and dreary nights. And still the days went on, and the new moon never came. Naturally the Fenfolk were strange afraid and confused, and a lot of them went to the wise woman who dwelt in the old mill and asked if she could find out where the moon had gone. "Well," she said, after looking in the brewpot, and in the mirror, and in the book, "it be most strange, but I cannot rightly tell you what's happened with her. It be dark, and I cannot see anything in the spells. Go slow, children. I'll think on it, and maybe I can help you yet. If you hear of anything, come by and tell me, but meanwhile put a pinch of salt, a straw and a button on the door-sill at night, and the horrors will not come over it, light or no light." So they went their ways, and as days went by and never a new moon came, naturally they talked, my word, but I reckon they did talk. Their tongues wagged like you'd never believe at home and at the inn and in the yard. But so came one day, as they sat on their great settle in the inn, a man from the far end of the boglands was smoking and listening, when all at once he sat up and slapped his knee. "In faith," he says, "I'd clean forgot, but I reckon I know where the moon is." And he told them how he was lost in the bogs, and how when he was nigh dead with fright the light shone out, and all the evil things fled away, and he found a path and got home safe.
and I was so amazed with fear like, says he, I didn't rightly look where the light came from. But I mind fine it was soft and white like the moon herself, and it came from something dark standing near a black snag in water. And I didn't rightly look, says he again, but I seemed to mind a shining face and yellow hair in the middle of the dazzle, and it had sort of a kind look, like the old moon herself above the fens at night. So off they went again to the wise woman and told her about it. She looked long in the pot, and in the mirror, and in the book again, and then she nodded her head. It's dark still, children, dark, said she, and I cannot rightly see anything. But do as I tell you, and you'll find out for yourselves. Go, all of you, just before the night gathers, put a stone in your mouths and take a hazel twig in your hands, and say never a word till you're safe home again. Then walk on, and fear nothing, far into the middle of the marsh, till you find a coffin, a candle, and a cross. Then you'll be not far from your moon. Look, and maybe you'll find her. They looked, each at the other, and scratched their heads. But where will we find her, mother, says one. And how will we go, says another. And won't the bogles catch us, says a third, and so on. Tch, says she, vexed like. Pack of fools, I can tell you no more. Do as I told you and fear nothing. And if you don't like it, then stay by the house, and do without your moon if you will. So come the next night in the darkling, out they went all together, every man wi' a stone in his mouth and a hazel twig in his hand, and feeling, you may reckon, most afraid and creepy. And they stumbled and tottered along the paths into the middle of the bogs. They saw nothing, though they heard sighing and fluttering in their ears, and felt cold wet fingers touching them. Still on they went, looking round for the coffin, the candle, and the cross, while they came near to the pool at the side of the great snag where the moon lay buried. All at once they stopped, quaking and mazed and scared, for there was the great stone, half in, half out of the water, for all the world like a strange big coffin. And at the head was the black snag, stretching out its two arms in a dark, gruesome cross, and on it a tiny light flickered like a dying candle. They all knelt down in the muck and crossed themselves. They went nearer, and they took hold of the big stone and shoved it up, and afterward they said that for one tiny minute they saw a strange and beautiful face looking up at them glad-like, out of the black water. But the light came so quick and so white and shining that they stepped back, mazed with it, and with the great angry wail that came from the fleeing horrors. And the very next minute, when they could see again, there was the full moon in the sky, bright and beautiful and kind as ever, shining and smiling down at them, and making the bogs and paths as clear as day, and stealing into the very corners of those who'd drive the darkness and the bogles clean away if she could. So home the Fenfolk went, gladly and with light hearts, and ever since the moon shines brighter and clearer over the bogs than elsewhere, for she minds fine that the horrors come with the dark, and mischance and mischief and all evil things, and that the Fenfolk sought her and found her when she was dead and buried in the bog, and put her in the sky again.